All right, welcome. Today, we're going to put on our detective hats and crack the code on, well, password-protected files. We're going to demystify exactly how it's done. Let's dive right into this digital investigation.
You know the feeling, right? We've all been there. You find some old file, maybe a zip archive, you give it a double click, and bam, you're hit with a password prompt. You have absolutely no idea what it is, and suddenly your own data is being held hostage. So how in the world do you get back in?
So, here's our game plan. First, we'll look at our digital locked box. Then we'll meet our digital locksmith. After that, we'll tackle two different cases. One is pretty simple, the other much tougher. And finally, we'll see what all this tells us about the strength of our own digital locks.
Okay, so our investigation starts with two password-protected zip files. Think of these as our digital locked boxes. We can tell there's something inside, but we don't have the key.
And what's really interesting here is that we can actually see the names of the files inside the archive. We just can't get to them. I mean, trying to guess the password could take, well, forever. We need a much smarter way to do this.
So when you can't pick a real lock by hand, who do you call? A locksmith, right? Well, in the digital world, we need a specialized tool for this exact job. Let's meet ours.
This is our locksmith, a really powerful open-source tool called John the Ripper. It's designed for one thing: password recovery and security auditing. That makes it the perfect detective to help us crack these cases wide open.
You know, the process is actually surprisingly straightforward. First, we have to extract a unique digital fingerprint from the file. It's called a hash. Then, we feed that hash to our locksmith, John the Ripper. And finally, if everything goes according to plan, it spits out the password.
All right, time to put our locksmith to the test with our very first file. This is where we get to see just how fast a simple lock can be picked. Now, we can't just give the zip file directly to our tool. We have to use a little helper program, zip2john, to basically translate the file's password protection into a language that John the Ripper can understand. And that language is the file's hash, its unique digital fingerprint.
So we run the tool and there it is. Almost instantly the password pops up, Pokemon. Wow, that was incredibly fast. But how did it do that?
It feels a bit like magic, doesn't it? Did it read our minds? Nah, of course not. What it did use was a very clever and super efficient strategy.
So here is the secret. John the Ripper isn't just guessing randomly, like A, B, C. It comes with its own built-in dictionary of really common, frequently used passwords. So after trying a couple of quick things like your username, it just starts running through this list. And because Pokemon is such a common password, it was sitting right there, just waiting to be found.
Okay, that first case was kind of a walk in the park. But what happens when the password isn't on some common list? Let's move over to our second file and see how our locksmith handles a real challenge. This one is a much tougher nut to crack.
We run the exact same process, but this time, that default password list comes up totally empty. The password just isn't there. So the tool falls back to its last-ditch effort, literally guessing every single possible combination of characters. This is what's known as a brute force attack.
And this is a perfect illustration of the two main strategies. The brute force method, it will eventually find the password, but it could take days or years or maybe even centuries. The wordlist attack, on the other hand, is much smarter because it only focuses on passwords that are actually likely. Our first attack worked because Pokemon was a likely candidate. This one is failing because brute force is just way too slow.
So, if the default list failed and brute force is way too slow, what do? Well, we need a better list. We need a more specialized cheat sheet, one that's tailored to our target.
This is where resources like SecLists come into play. It's this massive, publicly available collection of password lists that have been gathered from security breaches, from research, and from common patterns. It is the go-to library for any security professional who's looking for a really good cheat sheet.
And this is where the real creativity kicks in. Instead of just a generic list, we can use a specialized one. Let's say we suspect the password is related to a season. We could use a list that has not just spring and summer, but thousands of targeted variations with numbers, with symbols, and with common substitutions.
So we point John the Ripper to this new specialized word list, and we run it against our second file. And there it is. The password is summer 2022 hash. A password that would have taken ages to brute force was found in an instant. And the speed is it's staggering. Less than 1 second. This really shows you the immense power of a targeted attack. It's not about guessing everything. It's about guessing the right things.
So, after cracking both of our digital safes, what did we actually learn here? What does this little detective story tell us about our own security? Let's do a quick recap. Case number 1 used a simple, common word and was broken by a default list. Case number 2 used a more complex but still predictable pattern, a word, a year, and a symbol, and it was broken by a specialized list. But look, in both cases, the result was exactly the same, an instant failure of the lock.
So here's the crucial point. Just adding a number or a symbol to a common word doesn't really make you safe, because those cheat sheets already account for that. True password strength comes from unpredictability, not just from looking complex. And for attackers, the smart money is always on using a targeted word list, not a slow, clunky brute force attack.
And that brings us to the final and most critical question. Thinking about the patterns we've just seen. Common words, names, dates, simple substitutions. Does your own password follow a predictable pattern? Because if it does, there's a pretty good chance it might already be on one of these public cheat sheets, just waiting to be found.